There are no people in the future.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. UPS and Teamsters, yes, they announced a historic deal, historic contract. That was after it looked like we were about a week out from what could have been the largest strike potentially in U.S. history, but it quite amazing. But anyways, it was pronounced by the Teamsters initially. It was a historic contract win. Now we have yet to see all the details. People have yet to see all the details, and next week, on Monday, all members will see the details of the contract. But since that announcement has come out, there are some folks, in particular the 180,000 part-time workers, may not have gotten as good a deal as their first kind of led to believe. Now we've seen some reporting that said this, they feel like part-timers have been sold out or left out of the contract, or that somehow the saw it already broken down. We saw information that Biden was putting pressure upon the settlement, but that stuff is going to play itself out. We're going to be following this story. That comes on the heels, of course, on Monday night, right? We had Alexandra Bradbury on the show from Labor Notes talking about the UPS contract and the organizing that went into kind of got us there over the past couple decades. It was a great show. And then the next day is when we announced the historic deal. So we shall see on that one. Now, what could prove to be a sign that higher education faculty are willing to step up and fight to even a greater degree, the American Association of University Test, test, test. You got sound now, everybody? I think I have sound now. I think I've got sound now. Yes? Okay, great. All right, I'm just going to restart the show. Yep, here I am. Okay, cool. Thank you all. Thank you all. All right, give me a second and we'll get going.
The future. The future. Hello, hello. Is there anybody there? It seems I'm all alone again. Does anybody care? This planet's empty. I see no signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive.
There are no people in the future.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Ah, oh. Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Friday, July 28th, 2023. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Friday Politics Roundup. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. Each week we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And look, you can support this show right now by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress for all the details. And if you're looking for something else to do, head on over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen on, and leave a comment to let other folks know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show. And we can't let Paul Martino, Moms for Liberty, and their oligarch friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Raging Chicken has teamed up with Levelfield to launch a truly community-rooted PAC to invest in organizing, supporting local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmasking the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. We're putting small-dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You can get more information and drop your donation at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. Oh, now you're saying major echo, Jenny? You got to be kidding me. Okay. Let me try one more thing. How about now? Did the echo go away? Okay, thanks. Great. I figured it out. Surprise, surprise. All right. I'm going to go ahead and restart one more time. Sorry about this, guys. This is just insane what I've had to do this week. Okay. Hold on. We're going back to the beginning. 3, 2, 1.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people?
Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Friday, July 28th, 2023. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Friday Politics Roundup. This is attempt number 3 this morning. Yes, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Each week, we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. Whew. You can help support this show by heading over to our Patreon. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Go to www.patreon.com. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time we go live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, well, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen on. And leave a comment to let other folks know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show. And we can't let Paul Martino, Moms for Liberty, and their oligarch friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Raging Chicken has teamed up with Levelfield to launch a truly community-rooted PAC to invest in organizing, supporting local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmasking the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. We're putting small dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You get more information and drop your donation at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. On today's show, we got a lot of stuff going on this week. Yes, new indictments against Trump were just announced. That ditch just keeps getting deeper. Yes. And this week, the UPS Teamsters announced a historic contract win just a week before what could have been one of the largest strikes in American history. Now, the details of the contract will be proof to that claim, of course. Now, since the announcement, some UPS Teamsters are saying that the union's 180,000 part-time workers may not have gotten as good a deal as first suggested. So we're going to see how that plays itself out. But there's no doubt that people were definitely on edge. There's all sorts of suggestions that Biden was putting pressure upon the Teamsters to settle, Teamsters at UPS to settle, that there may have been some other factors. We just don't know, right? I mean, all this conjecture at this point. On Monday, the 31st, the full contract is going to be shared, for at least what we know, is going to be shared with members. And then voting should begin shortly after that. And the voting window is open for a couple weeks at least. So at least there's a tentative agreement, but the members have yet to speak and really take a look at what they got. So we shall see. And what could prove to be a sign that higher education faculty are willing to step up and fight to an even greater degree. The American Association of University Professors, the AAUP, voted to affiliate with the American Federation of Teachers. The alliance will now be the largest union of higher education faculty in the country, and that will put them at about 300,000 strong. Following new scientific data from the World Meteorological Organization on the summer's record heat, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres claimed that the era of global warming has ended and the era of global boiling has arrived. I'll say. Need any proof? Well, check these out. It's been so hot in Arizona that the state's famous saguaro cacti are literally collapsing. You know, the ones, the big arms? They're literally falling over for the intense heat and lack of water. That's crazy. Ocean temperatures, here's another one. Ocean temperatures around Florida are signaling over 100 degrees, which could be a global record. Now, these are preliminary findings. We'll see if that bears itself out, but there's been record heat in the ocean temperatures all around Florida and through the North Atlantic. And we've also begun to see coral bleaching events beginning around Florida. Scientists are rushing to save some of the coral in hopes to be able to repopulate it when the temperatures drop. But this is a sign of our future. And if you need something else that climate change is giving us to worry about, well, check this one out. More Americans are developing a rare meat allergy, alpha-gal syndrome, which is linked to bites from the Lone Star tick. Now, new data from the CDC finds a steep increase in the cases of alpha-gal. Alpha-gal can give you stomach cramps, diarrhea, hives, shortness of breath that could trigger fatal anaphylaxis, and that's according to the BBC. And of course, as we know, as the temperatures change and they get warmer, populations of all sorts of critters begin to migrate, and one of them is this Lone Star tick. Great. Now, GM and other major auto manufacturers announced that they will be building 30,000 electric vehicle chargers to help build out the electric vehicle charging network across the country, which we'll see. Still, I'd wanted to see that investment in public transportation, but we'll just, we don't even have time for baby steps anymore, but whatever. We'll take what we can get, I guess. Now, our Republican politicians and media personalities make it seem as though parents across the country are just up in arms about their public schools. Well, it turns out about 80% of parents responding to a new Gallup poll said they are somewhat or completely satisfied with their child's school. That confirms what a string of other polls told us that during the pandemic, right? That parents are generally really satisfied with their local schools. Where's the gap? Well, between that kind of national picture and the ideological and propaganda that we get on kind of like in like Fox News, right-wing media and so on, versus what's happening in people's backyards, right? So we talk about other people's schools or the nation's schools, then people have problems. We talk about their own schools. Oh no, they're great, right? Pretty crazy. And Mitch McConnell suffered a medical incident in the middle of a press conference. The party line is that he's fine. But no information about what actually happened was released. And it was a little creepy, I gotta say. It was the kind of thing where, he was starting this press conference, start with the middle of a sentence, and his mouth just kind of closed tight, and he stared off in the distance. It was kind of freaky. My first thought was the guy probably had a stroke. But, I'm not a medical personnel at all, so don't take that from me. It's a little strange that nobody's releasing anything, especially since the huge uproar against John Fetterman and other, all the medical ailments of anybody else in Congress that happens to be a Democrat. But it turns out once a Republican, then, other Democrats and generally the kind of the public is fairly, expresses like concern, right? Or hope that he's okay, right? Even if we fundamentally disagree with the guy, politically. But, no right-wing grifters are out there kind of like calling for Mitch McConnell to step down and some sort of Chinese communist kind of conspiracy that Mitch McConnell is a robot. None of that, right? So crazy. Yeah, Amy said early stages of dementia. Yeah, that's I've seen some people kind of be thinking about that too as well. I mean, that could be what's going on. We shall see. And Central Bucks School Board voted to give their superintendent, Dr. Abram Lukabaugh, an $86,000 raise and a New Year five-year contract. Yep, that's a 40% raise. I love a 40% raise. Would you like a 40% raise? He'd like a 40% raise. Yep, that's after, of course, Lukabaugh joined the board's new right-wing majority, right? To ban books, institute anti-LGBTQ policies, and so much more. He will now be one of the highest paid public school administrators in Pennsylvania. And right down the road, the Penridge School District, their board members are enraged, some of them at least, over secret curriculum meetings between Vermilion Education's Jordan Adams and select members of the board, right? Now, Christine Baticki, she used to be one of the darlings of the far right, used to be kind of like one of the kind of, I guess, Red Wizard apprentices. Well, she's apparently on the outs now because she's talking publicly about the fact that she just found out by happenstance that Jordan Blomgren and Megan Bannis Clemens were meeting secretly with Adams to discuss the direction of the curriculum. All right, that's despite Christine Baticki being on the curriculum committee, right? Transparency is what they say. And this past weekend, Barbie broke box office records as the right wing lost its collective mind. Again. Oh, God. And my heart broke a little bit. Sinead O'Connor died at the age of 56. I spent a little time listening to her stuff and was flooded with the memories, what that music meant in my life and when it came in and of all that. And I got to see, just came across a really passionate tribute to Sinead O'Connor written by Morrissey. And in that, he also condemns the music industry for how they treated her. I mean, there was a story, for example, it's not what he told, but this was in one of the articles, I think in The Guardian, it was, talking about some of the history with her. Is like, we're talking about, how she shaved her head, and that dates back, apparently, as the story goes, to a time early on in her career, when one of her producers or someone in the industry or manager or something like this said that she needs to be more girly, or her hair needs to be more girly, and her response to that was to shave her head. And that pretty much shows you it was like one of these windows into her life. We'll get to that and more today. For more PA Progressive Talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern. Check out his YouTube channel, Twitter, or Facebook, wherever you get your streams, and subscribe to his podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Check out thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at the Night Caucus. That's at the Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. And if you haven't heard, The Signal is a new podcast by the Bucks County Beacon. The Signal is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by yours truly. Twice a month, The Signal will shine a light on the right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions so that we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive roots. Check out the podcast at buckscountybeacon.podbean.com or wherever you get your podcast. And attention all you gamers out there, The Game In, that's with 2 N's. The Game In is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything for retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. It's a great place. You got a question about a game, looking for something hard to get, they've got you covered. Check them out on their Facebook page or follow them on Twitter at TheGameIn, again with 2 N's. Shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. And a shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff and follow his YouTube page. And check him out on Twitter at @SongADayMan. That's @SongADayMan with 2 N's on Twitter. Look, everybody, want progressive future? We need progressive media. Support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. Become a patron of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. We're here for the fight, and we need you. Become a patron for the price of a good beer once a month. Help keep the media in the movement and the movement in the media. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month by going to patreon.com/rcpress today. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. And a special shout out goes to Jenny and Amy, who let me know that we had no sound this morning. Yes, that's right. Now, despite the fact I had tested all this stuff ahead of time, checked it all out ahead of time, made sure everything was up and running. But as you know, the past few weeks, there's been a little technological adjustment happening over here. My mixer blew out right before last Friday's show. And so I've had to jerry-rig something. And I've got it working out, but it turns out there's all these little quirks that still start showing up. Today, first, for some reason, the mic was not registering once I let the stream go live. And then once I was able to get it going live, then I had a massive echo. We got that fixed, and we should be good to go now. But so thank you, Amy and Jenny, for letting me know what was going on. And that's what allows you to hear me now. So here you go. Yep, big deal, obviously, coming up again. And I don't mean to sound dismissive of this, right? That's not my intention. But as you know, if you listen to this podcast, you know that everything that's happening with Trump right now, right? That's in the hands of the courts, right? There's the hands thing there, and there's not a whole lot I can do about it, right? There's not a whole lot of, say, organizing that we can do about this, right? We can write letters, we could say, but it's in court, it's in court right now. So call me, I don't know what you want to call me about this, but following each kind of like step in the law case, like if you really want to find out what's happening day by day, or you want to get all people's hot takes on what is happening and what's going through the minds of prosecutors, just go watch MSNBC at night. That's all they cover now, right? So I mean, and so I feel, why waste too much time talking about that, right? There's MSNBC's wall-to-wall coverage of kind of the intricacies of the trials that are happening with Trump. So if you want to know about that, I encourage you to go check that out. But for me, not so much. But it is significant, right, for today. So a new indictment comes down regarding this handling of classified documents down in Mar-a-Lago. And it looks like now there's been some, at least two, I believe, other employees who have also been, let's see, were also charged on Thursday. At least maybe that's just one. But about the attempts to destroy evidence that included like attempting to flood an area to make the cameras stop working, or all the recordings, the security cameras that would be kind of like malfunction, they wouldn't be able to hold on to their data, so the prosecutors couldn't get it. There's also apparently the concern about with that, want to get rid of the footage, is because not only would it basically show that Trump actually had the documents, but to see who had access to them, right? Because people could walk back and forth and see who's there. Oh, look, they're on camera. They're going in there checking out the documents, right? That's not Trump. That's like, who's that? You know, we never saw. So, so we shall see. We shall see. So now I'll just say this. The indictment laid out what federal authorities say was a scheme to obstruct in the ongoing investigation. Trump was very focused on not allowing officials to get their hands on his boxes, it indicates. These are from court documents. They said, quote, "I don't want anybody looking. I don't want anybody looking through my boxes. I really don't," Trump told his lawyer in May 2022, according to the indictment. Quote, "What happens if we just don't respond at all, or we don't play ball with them? Wouldn't it be better if we just told them we don't have anything here?" Unquote. And it kind of goes on, right? I mean, it's the same old stuff that you can say. The man's a horrible human being, and he's clearly broken all sorts of laws, has his entire life, and now maybe he'll face some justice. But we shall see. I mean, I have very, little trust in the justice system when it comes to rich people. Okay? Never mind Donald Trump. The fact that he's rich, that's what is ultimately going to matter, right? The fact that, do we prosecute criminals at the highest level, right? And it's only when they're quasi-official, right? Yeah, sure, we're going to go after, people go after like, mob bosses, right? Because, they're outside the acceptable kind of capitalist accumulation scheme, right? But, if you're playing roughly within the rules of the capitalist ball game, right? Guess what? You got that get out of jail free card pretty much sticking in your pocket, right? It's like wired in or kind of sewn into all your clothing, right? All your Armani, Gucci stuff, right? So, right? Yes, but that's how, the American judicial system works, right? As every once in a while, you do prosecute a rich person so everybody can point to them and say, see, no, there's equal justice under the law. But the vast majority of people know that that's not the way it works. So the fact that Trump was a former president, and this is unprecedented in terms of the charges, in terms of the trial, I just think that points to my own skepticism or cynicism, if you will, about that he's actually going to face justice for what he's done. Now, I hope to God I'm wrong, right? I hope he goes to jail for a long, long time. But whatever. So that's that. So now this week, the big news at the beginning of the week, of course, was that the Teamsters announced that they had reached a what they called a historic tentative agreement for the workers at UPS. Right now, that originally came out, and it was, a cause for celebration. I mean, based upon I went in, I kind of looked at the actual announcement, looked at the details that they put out, and it truly did look like it was a historic contract. They said, look, this is a historic contract. We won gains for all of our workers. We fought against the two-tiered system of employment, and there were no concessions, right? That was the way it was put forward. And I was like, damn, that's great. Because you remember, just on this past Monday, we had Alexandra Bradbury on the show from Labor Notes. She's the editor of Labor Notes. She was on the show talking about the history of organizing, like the past several decades of kind of member-to-member, rank-and-file organizing to change the direction of teachers and making it a fighting union once again, right? Away from the behind the scenes, kind of closed doors, boss run union into a true powerhouse of worker organization. And so, I mean, and there's no doubt about it. There's been like a seismic shift in the Teamsters, right? And one of the key claims that was coming out of the organizing, one of the reasons why there was potentially going to be a strike is they were fighting against a two-tiered system, right? In other words, that you've got your regular employees and then you've got part-timers, you've got second-class citizens, or you've got, all this. And the majority of the workers in that contract, the full-time ones and so on like this, are the ones who get the most benefits, while the part-timers generally get the shaft, right? That's the way that two-tier contracts work. I mean, my own union, ABSCUF, has fought against that. It's one of the reasons we went on strike, probably one of the main reasons we went on strike in 2016. Was over the administration's Pashi's attempts to create a two-tier system that we would kind of, divide and conquer move. That's what UPS has been doing for quite some time. That the last contract, as Alexander Bradbury talked about on Monday, the last Teamsters contract for UPS was voted down by the membership, but the leadership of the union at that time, Hoffa and his people, right? They basically found a loophole in some of their policies and bylaws that allowed them to institute the contract. So in other words, against the wishes of their members, right, the leadership of the Teamsters imposed the contract that they had agreed to, the tentative agreement that they had agreed to with the bosses, right, with the management. So that was one of the things that fueled, Hoffa getting voted out. Right, Sean O'Brien, becoming the new president with a new kind of mentality to say that no, we are gonna fight for our members and we are gonna organize our members, and that has been incredibly inspiring, and I think has been really significant and an inspiration to the rest of the labor movement. Now, since that contract, since it has announced that contract, there has been some indications of some disenchantment from the part-time workers left in the deal. So the first one that I saw, again, I don't know if this is first out of the gate, but Mike Elk reported in the Payday Report. I'll just read a little bit from here, and we shall see if this plays itself out. He says Teamsters UPS deal leaves out 180,000 part-timers. Said earlier today, the Teamsters announced that they had reached a historic tentative agreement. The Teamsters had not released the legal language yet, but just the highlights. Again, that's not unusual. That's normally how it works, right? Until everything gets buttoned up and the members get to see it first. So the Teamsters said, "We changed the game," tweeted the Teamsters. Today, the Teamsters reached the most historic tentative agreement in the history of UPS. Now, the news shocked many who expected the Teamsters Union would hold out until their contract expired on July 31st before reaching a deal. This past weekend, Teamsters President Sean O'Brien declared at a rally on the weekend, "We've organized, strategized, and now it's time to pulverize." However, President Biden pressured the Teamsters to settle nearly a week before the deadline to avoid any shocks that uncertainty of the strike could cause the economy. Now, today's announcement, quote, this is what Biden says in a statement, and Mike Elk claims that the Teamsters did not want to upset the White House. Now, this is the thing that we shall see what happens in the details. Says the contract leaves over 180,000 part-timer UPS workers with no path to making full-time status or wages equivalent to what full-timers earn, maintaining a subcategory of part-time precarious workers at UPS. Part-time workers will start at $21 an hour. Only 7,500 part-time workers will be converted to full-time. Less than 10,000 part-time workers converted to full-time status during the 1997 strike. Right. Now, quote, "I petitioned with the Teamsters for Democratic Unions call for a $25 hour base wage. I've been telling that my coworkers for 5 months," Chicago-based UPS part-timer Peter Linsco told Payday Report. "The part-time activists I'm plugged into are furious. I feel betrayed." Other part-time workers said the contract, which only guarantees part-time drivers 3.5 hours a day, does little to eliminate the problem of part-time workers being forced to work full-time hours at much lower wages. Right, and it kind of goes on. And so Kim Kelly, also kind of labor reporter, also was starting to hear from some part-timers that there were some kind of issues. But we'll know more when the details come out next week, right? More is going to start. More actual kind of in-depth reporting is going to happen, because look, here's a couple things I know about working with on contracts, right? Or being a part of a union, is that no matter what contract gets signed, right, there's always going to be detractors, right? There's always going to be people that saying that this contract didn't do enough, right? And speaking as somebody who has often been that person, or one of those people, right, who are angry at the settlement, right, and think that we should have done more and held out for more, right? So I'm not saying that provides an excuse. I'm not saying what the part-timers are saying is illegitimate. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm just saying is that it is common to hear this kind of coming out of contracts, especially in a highly organized environment, right? So that shouldn't surprise us, right? That we're going to hear kind of people saying things didn't go far enough, right? I can tell you, I spoke to a UPS driver the other day. This was, I think it was on Tuesday, right after the contract got settled, and asked him to say, "Wait, I heard the news." I said, "Is this good news?" And I asked him. Now he was a driver; he was a full-time employee. I asked him if is this good news? He said, "Yeah, it's pretty good." Right? He didn't say it was the best. I said, "Yeah, it's pretty good." He said, "At least we were able to avoid the strike and stuff." And I said, this guy's working, right? He's going, he's not in a situation we can sit and have a long chat with him. But, we stopped and talked for a few minutes, and that's what he said. He said, yeah, it was good. He seemed happy with it, right? It seemed, he's not going to share with me, he's not going to share with me necessarily, that all the details are some of his reservations, right? He was generally happy. He was proud of what they did, right? So that's good. But that's anecdotal. And so there's going to be other voices that are coming out. They're going to say no. Now, once workers actually see all the contract language, right, and once we start getting a sense of what that contract shows, then we're going to know a little about what happened in those negotiations. And then we'll also start to get more reporting about what the Biden administration actually did, what kind of pressure they brought, and what kind of threats, if any, were issued for here. And then we're also going to start hearing, more from the Teamsters, right? We're going to start hearing more about, this is the best contract they could achieve and why. So with assessment. So here's why I'm spending a little time on this right now up front, is because one thing that we should recognize regardless, right? I don't think it's going, this is just based upon what I've been reading. I don't think the final contract, the language that we're going to see, is going to say that basically it ignored $180,000 part-timers, right? I don't believe that's true, right? Even in the details that were released, right? There's clear stuff that's directed toward the part-timers. However, given the whatever the pressures, or given the way negotiations work, right? It could very well be true that the part-timers, that, the thing that was given up in the negotiation was the hard line of the part-timer, the solidarity between full-timers and part-timers, right? That somebody on the negotiation team was convinced, or people on the negotiation team were convinced that, yes, there were enough people, or that they got some increases, and this is a step in the right direction. You always start hearing this kind of language, right? And that is going to piss off a lot of the part-timers. So we're going to see what happens there. But we should recognize the amazing amount of organizing that went into this, right? My biggest concern coming out of this, right, and reason why I think we should look at this, right, hear what the workers actually have to say, not what commentators have to say, hear where they are, and I'm talking part-timers, full-timers across this stuff, so we kind of see what happened in the contract, certainly. But my biggest concern is that the infighting, right, or the sniping back and forth of people who don't have a direct stake in the game, right, will lead to dissatisfaction and a decrease in organizing. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, right? That's just kind of my concern. Because what UPS did, right, the fact that they were out there and they were ready to strike, right, and the fact that we saw a nationwide focus on what was happening among the Teamsters and the organizing that was happening in there, bolstered what was happening in the labor movement, right? As much as it drew energy from the organizing that's going on, it also gave that energy back in saying that we are ready to do this. The UPS pilots who were not in these contract negotiations, them publicly stating we are not flying packages, we are not crossing picket lines. That's incredible. Solidarity across contracts and across workers, right? That's important. We get to see what that looks like, right? So let's be clear, because we also got the SAG-AFTRA and WGA strike is ongoing, right? And we also have, that's a huge sector, right, of the American economy as well. Different kind of work, but nonetheless it is work, right? And they're fighting for some of the exact same issues that were on the table with this UPS strike. So what's hopefully going to happen too as well is that that's also going to lend its support. The language and understanding of what's happening to the American workforce is also going to kind of bolster what's happening in the SAG-AFTRA WGA strike. So we shall see. But it's just big news. This is all play itself out. It is incredible week. And then to have at the same time, you have the American Association of University Professors voting to affiliate with the AFT. That's also huge. Right. Here's a little bit from the. This is from the AFT, from the statement that was released. Right. It says the historic alliance comes against the backdrop of increased legislative attacks on teaching and academic freedom, as well as persistent underfunding of public higher education that has led to the explosion in student debt, as well as adjunct precarity and poverty. Through the affiliation, the 44,000 member AAUP and the 1.7 million member AFT will work hand in hand to protect academic freedom and unify faculty voices to fight back at the local, state, and federal levels. Right? I wanted to focus on that paragraph in particular of the statement, because what that's showing you is that if the organizing follows what they have written here, this is critical, right? You're talking about an approach to organizing, an approach to unionization across, like the nationwide, right? That it's looking at the intersection of the erosion of academic freedom, right? Political, legislative attacks on teaching, right? The undermining of the working conditions of faculty, right? Underfunding of public higher education, explosion of student debt, as well as part-time, that's adjunct precarity and poverty, right? There is your collection, your reason for organizing. And if that becomes a recommitment to go after those issues, this is going to be fantastic, right? I especially think this is going to be good for the AAUP, right? In part because the AAUP has their history, right? AAUP's history is initially as kind of this association, right? It's an association, and there were some chapters of the AAUP which just they had members, but they were kind of like, more, they quote unquote negotiated, but they didn't really have binding contracts, because they weren't considered a union at that particular place, things like this, right? So it had this kind of like, and this has been changing over the years, certainly, but it had for a long time this kind of this reputation, right, of being stuck between, are we professionals, right, or like, are we kind of like, like doctors, professionals, or are we workers, right? This kind of back and forth, and it's just that's such a messed up mentality, right? It has more to do with like academia's like sense of their own self-importance in some ways, right? To think that we're so fundamentally different than all these other people, right? And just a different kind of work. Just, get over yourselves, right? It's the kind of thing. But anyways, that's been changing, like as kind of the conditions in higher education have gotten worse. So it makes sense that these AAUP is becoming more and more of a kind of active kind of militant union. And the AFT is actually starting to respond to things, right? AFT, like many kind of big unions, has also, grew a little complacent there for a while, but its internal organizing by members, right? Wildcat strikes and things like this have helped revitalize EFT. So we shall see where this goes. But I think that's ultimately a positive step forward when it comes to what's happening, at least in higher ed. So we have in that too. Bunch of stuff that I listed at the beginning of here. Now, again, we don't need to go into an immense amount of detail here, but yes, the fact that UN Secretary Antonio Guterres talks about the the era of global boiling has arrived, it's well put. Now, I saw some people sniping today on Twitter and things like this, like, well, look, no matter how many times we change the name of it still doesn't matter. And I get that, right? Totally hear it, right? Certainly has been the case. But that doesn't change the truth of what he's saying. I mean, I think our language has to respond to the crisis, right? I mean, we can't just keep on calling it like, should we just call it like, if it doesn't matter what we call things, then like, okay, then let's just call it like, global shift or something like this. No, I have to find some way of registering the crisis, right, in language. So the area of global boiling has arrived, I think, is pretty apt, especially as we saw these record temperatures happen in the ocean off the coast of Florida. 100 degrees, that's like hot tub like temperature. And frankly, there's just, species, right? Coral, as one example, can't survive in that, right? I mean, and the fact that you've got like the arms of the giant cactuses in Arizona falling off because it's too hot for cacti? Are you freaking kidding me? And there has been so little rain that the cacti, the ones who don't need a lot of rain, that the cacti are withering and falling apart, collapsing. I mean, you could snipe at, Gutierrez saying global boiling instead of, global warming, but what the hell else are you going to say? I mean, like, climate catastrophe, yes. Climate crisis, yes. Right? How do you indicate that, look, it's not just warming anymore, it's getting to the point where people are going to die. People are dying. People are falling over, right? They trip, they fall on the concrete or fall on the asphalt, and they're getting third-degree burns. It's so hot. And we're going to get a tiny taste of this in the Northeast this weekend, right? Temperature's supposed to go into the 90s. We're going to have heat index of over 103. But yeah, that's because of the humidity. But that's nowhere near. 3 weeks straight, more than 3 weeks straight of temperatures over 110 in Phoenix. That's pretty nuts. And this is not just the United States. You got to understand, right? I mean, I know you understand. I know if you're listening to the show, you understand. But we all have to just kind of constantly come back to the fact that this is not just the United States. This is not just about a heat wave. This is about global temperatures. And that it's about the burning of fossil fuels. As Gutierrez said, he said, humanity is in the hot seat. For vast parts of North America, Asia, and Europe, it is a cruel summer. For the entire planet, it is a disaster. And for scientists, it is unequivocal. Humans are to blame. All this is entirely consistent with predictions and repeated warnings. The only surprise is the speed of the change. Climate change is here. It is terrifying, and it is just the beginning. The era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived. Gutierrez urged politicians to take swift action. Quote, the air is unbreathable, the heat is unbearable, and the level of fossil fuel profits and climate inaction is unacceptable. Leaders must lead. No more hesitancy, no more excuses, no more waiting for others to move fast. There is simply no more time for that. And, I don't know how else you put it, right? I mean, anybody here, been saying this, I know that, look, we got some major actions that are coming up by the PA Climate Convergence here. Karen Faraday and the folks for Burke's Gas Truth, we're going to have them on pretty soon again, as promised, right? When she was on the show last time, we said, okay, we'll bring it back on later in the summer when we start getting closer to this. And I think that's this is probably a good time for it. Remind us, we should be there for the Climate Convergence in Harrisburg. For there. So we'll get details on that coming out. maybe I'll see if I didn't mention this at the top of the show, but we have again, it's one of these weeks. I have a few irons in the fire for looking for guests for Monday. But maybe I'll reach out to Karen too as well. See, maybe we get her on Monday. Given this new report, I think that would be a good fit. I could postpone some others at a different time, but whatever. So yeah, there we have it. Now this week we also saw that GM and other automakers are going to build 30,000 electric vehicle chargers. The companies, which include, let me see, BMW Group, General Motors, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, Mercedes-Benz Group, and Stellantis, they will initially invest at least $1 billion in a joint venture that will build 30,000 charging ports on major highways and other locations in the United States and Canada. The United States and Canada have about 36,000 fast chargers, and those that can replenish a drained battery in 30 minutes or less. In some sparsely populated areas, such chargers can be hundreds of miles apart, and surveys show that fear about not being able to find a charger during longer journeys is a major reason that car buyers are reluctant to buy electric vehicles, and this is coming from the report in the New York Times. Right? So kudos, to BMW, to General Motors, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, Mercedes-Benz, and Stellantis. Okay, you're all there. That's good, 30,000. But let's be clear, right? This is something that should have been done by our government, right? This is something that in the Build Back Better bill that Biden had proposed, this would have been something that would have been public investment. And why does that matter? Because guess what? Like these groups, BMW, General Motors, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, Mercedes-Benz Group, and Stellantis, they are not in it for the public good. They're in it for profit. So that means every time you're going to go charge up your electric car, if you have an electric car, right, that this group is going to benefit. They're going to profit off it because they're not doing it for free. They're going to profit. Right? Maybe if you buy one of their cars, you'll get a discount, right? Or maybe they'll put a little thing in that the charging stations that will make sure that only one of their cars is. They'll change their, specifications or something. Who knows? Kind of like what Tesla did. But it's frustrating, right? I mean, I'm sitting here gonna clap for these giant corporations who helped create this problem. And now we're going to get for-profit charging stations around the country is going to be our infrastructure bill. Privately owned, privately determined where they go. And if you're a corporation, guess what you're going to focus on? You're going to focus on where you're going to be serving your customers the most. Do you think you're going to be focused on rural areas? You think BMW and Mercedes is going to really give a crap about people kind of like, in the mountains in Pennsylvania or kind of like in other areas that are far distant? You think they're going to, no, because they're going to be like, hey, look, there's a little hole. Hey, let's look at Appalachia. A lot of poor folks. I don't know if we need so many there. We're looking at our demographic data about where our buyers are. Now, it's true, Hyundai and Kia, they have a little bit kind of better price stuff, but, they're going to put these things where the profit is, not where they're needed. And again, should they be doing this? Absolutely. Right? But we should say this is something we should be doing collectively, right? That we should be doing collectively with our government, right? Because this is what is supposed to represent all of us, to ensure that we all get kind of like a piece of the pie. This is also the reason that why, this should all be, we should have equal investment in public transportation, high-speed trains, like new rails, trolleys, short trains, right? I mean, it's crazy. But then the other thing, so there's that, and the other thing I just want to to mention, this is great, that great poll by the Gallup poll shows that about 80% of parents basically are satisfied with their kids' school. This is what I mean by when I said at the top of the show, the gap between like the real world and actual schools versus the ideological, the ideological construction of it. I was like, look, when people are plugged in, it's really interesting. You talk to parents, right? And there's, I mean, I live in an area where it's, it's mostly Republican, like majority Republican. But, a lot of parents you talk to, they're concerned about their schools, right? But if you ask them about their schools, right, talk to all these folks, these parents that went to my kids' schools, and you sit around different events, you talk about things like this, they love the school. All right, in the Penridge School District, right? They love the school. Talk about, oh man, these teachers are amazing, right? The principal's amazing, the aides are fantastic, they have those great events, we love it, we love it, we love it. Right? You hear them rave about like the education they get and the teachers at the high school and the middle school, like all this kind of stuff, right? And yet, the minute you start putting it in a political frame, you've got these crazies on our school board who are out there talking about like, pedophiles and grooming and all this other kind of stuff. But if you ask people about, even like, it's like you ask about their school, oh no, they're fine. But there could be others out there, we know this happened in other schools. And when politicians get their hands on this, they talk about the problems of all the stuff in schools. And, abstractly in the kind of right-wing mind, because they're involved in the right-wing media, it's a huge problem. It's like the looming boogeyman. It's over there, even though they can say in the same breath they love their schools. Their kids' schools. So, go figure. Go figure. That's our predicament, right? That's, yes, manufactured rage, Jenny. Absolutely, 100%. And that shows you kind of what happened, and what the fruits of that manufactured rage are, right? I mean, as I mentioned at the top, Central Bucks School Board voted to give Superintendent Abram Lukabal just a ginormous raise, 40% raise. I mean, just think about that. Would you like a 40% raise? I'd like a 40% raise. Now, what's incredible about this, right, is that, there's been some really good reporting about this. I want to pull over here for really good reporting about this, about that meeting, right, is that, there were a lot of parents who were at that meeting when the school board was voting on it, who were basically saying, like, look, we could say that there's reasons that he should get a raise, that, maybe that we could make an argument that he should get a raise, but a 40% raise, that it's crazy. The problem, of course, is that, one of the reasons why he's getting such a reward is he's shown that he is willing to go along with the extreme measures that the board has been taking, with the book banning, right? With all this. And, I read this one article about kind of what went on, and like if I hadn't gone on, this is the thing, right? This is why, like, for example, the Bucks County Beacon is such an incredible institution. I'm so thankful that we have the Bucks County Beacon now, right? Because I was reading this other article about it, and so like, a board member said this is the reason why we should give him a raise, and there were this reasons for it, and maybe it was a little bit much, but they all, and it just made it seem like, okay, there was just like this conversation happened. Right? There was virtually no mention of the fact that multiple people came forward and spoke about the problems of this contract. Right? And, there were these parents from the Moms for Liberty parents who basically showed up and were basically saying like, oh, because, he tracked down this and he got rid of this one guy, he got rid of this one guy because of his he was sexually abusing like another, and that's true. He did, right? However, he only did that because the person who was subjected to that, or people, I should say, Jackson Manning and Anna Shea Shafran, right? Jackson Manning in particular is because he was speaking out against what happened to him. And that was fine, right? But that's because somebody else came forward and then he had to do something about it. But the fact of the matter, there were other reports of abuse that was happening. There were multiple reports on it that there was no action taken because the public didn't know about it. So I'm not sure what the, what there. I mean, the board member, I mean, again, it's breaking down as this is kind of like team sports stuff now. Right. Team Republican is going to kind of, reward their lapdog. Well, he's more than a lapdog, actually. He's a willing participant in their agenda, and their kind of, all the culture war stuff. He's willing to do that. That's really why he's getting the raise. The other board members, of course, like Delangelo, Mahmoud, and Smith, right? They all spoke against the secrecy of the board and said that they had not known about the contract change until the agenda was posted on Friday. So they were not even consulted in this. Again, this is the majority going about and doing what they want and rewarding their people. This is out of the playbook of Hillsdale College, out of Vermilion Education, right? And there you go. So now, and there was all these initial questions too as well, because his contract's not up yet. So what they chose to do is dissolve his contract early. And there were some initial folks saying, wait, you can't do this. What are you doing here? So that they could reissue a new one for 5 years. Right? And if you do the math, it's because they want to make sure that he gets this new 5-year contract before the elections in the fall. Right? So that there's no risk that this guy is going to lose his job. Right? That's what's going on. And again, this is why we put so much attention in this stuff. You look at what happened in the Penridge School District, right? In the Penridge School District, in the Penridge School District, you've got just like internal wars, and there you've got it's all Republicans, right? As we said on kind of time after time after time after time, right? All these Republicans on our board are at war with themselves, because who's going to be the more extreme? And as we have said again and again and again, right? Really, there's not a big distance between the majority and minority on the board, right? With maybe the exception of Ron Wirtz. Maybe he's the one that there's actually kind of significant difference in terms of ideology. The main difference has been over, say, personality, number one, or number two, the way that you do things, right? So the way that you enact extreme policies is that wing is like the Joan Cullen wing, right? Joan Cullen, who knows the rules. Joan Cullen, who knows how to work that system. She knows the way that the structure works. She knows the bylaws. She knows the laws. Right? So she enacts just as extreme policies and has been there to enact just as extreme policies. But she forces them through by, being pretty somewhat above board about what the changes are going to be. Right? She meets her deadlines. That's what I mean. Right? So you need to announce something. You announce it plenty of time coming forward. Right? And when people object to it, you go like, I don't understand what the problem is, right? She has a much more sophisticated political understanding of how you enact extreme policies. Whereas you have Megan Bannis-Clemens, Jordan Blomgren, they're just burn the crap to the ground. They're like, we are going to force our stuff through now while we have the time. There is an urgency, and there is kind of, this is the time. And this is what they say, this is the time. This is our moment. So we are going to transform our little school district, right, into like a Christian nationalist associated site with a public dollar. It's just freaking nuts. But it was just reported this week. This is from the Bucks County Herald. I'll just read a little bit for you so you know what's going on. Penridge School Board member Christine Baticki says that she learned, quote, by happenstance Friday morning that curriculum consultant Jordan Adams would be meeting later that day with 2 other school directors. Baticki, a member of the board's curriculum committee, would have liked to sit in on the meetings to gain a better understanding of how Adams' recommendations for reviewing and rewriting curriculum have progressed since he landed a controversial last-minute $125 an hour contract in April, despite what critics said was limited experience. Of particular interest is the 9th grade social studies curriculum, which is being rewritten after the board dropped the high school graduation requirement for social studies from 4 credits to 3. but Batiki couldn't get anyone to tell her where or when the meeting would take place, whether Adams was there in person or over Zoom. Quote, "It's like this big secret," unquote, Batiki said. "That's why they're not telling us. They don't want us there." Batiki said she emailed Adams the next day to ask for his notes for the meeting. She said she had previously been told, quote, any board member could email him and he would be happy to respond to questions, unquote. Instead, Adams declined to tell Batiki what was discussed at the meeting. In an emailed response, he referred Batiki to either Curriculum Committee Chair Jordan Blomgren or Board Vice President Megan Bannis-Clemens, both who attended the meeting, for that information. Adams said that his company, Vermilion Education, quote, abides by all public meeting laws, and I don't believe it is my place to share the comments of specific board members, unquote. Adams did, however, include a copy of his progress report dated July 25th, covering consulting activities for the previous month. The one-page, 4-paragraph report said, quote, Vermilion is continuing the process of drafting and revising recommendations and model curricula for district considerations in 7th and 8th grade analysis of fiction and nonfiction, reading, English language arts, and social studies grades 1 through 5 and grades 9. Furthermore, district staff and I have discussed areas in which curricular recommendations may be strengthened in the curriculum, blah, blah, blah. This is just gobbledygook. The guy is putting gobbledygook forward just to say what it is. This is $125 an hour, secret meetings, rewriting the curriculum, and a one-page report on what's being spent. School is starting in about a month, and they do not have a social studies curriculum yet because this school board tanked the curriculum. You got to be freaking kidding me. Got to be freaking kidding me. I mean, look, Joan Cullen basically said a version of what I just said, right? This is in the same report. Board member Joan Cullen disagreed. She said, quote, this is what Penridge taxpayers are paying $125 an hour in unlimited numbers for, she said, referring to the July report. A guy to talk in vague terms about what he's supposedly doing, but never really showing anything of substance that he's accomplished? Exactly. So Cullen even said, look, I have no idea what our 9th graders are going to be learning when they walk in the door at the end of August, she said. It's a tall order for teachers to deliver a curriculum that they've never seen. Oh, God, I didn't know this. Jenny just said Penridge just also closed the ability to apply for the superintendent position. That's like, what's that, just over a week? That's been open? 2 weeks, maybe? I'm telling you, they've got their candidates. I know this like from like the universe. They've got their candidates already. They've already got people lined up to apply for this thing. They met their kind of like official obligation to post this stuff, and then they're going to bring in a whole lot of their people and maybe a few stragglers. I can feel it in my bones. Oh, God. Well, so we'll see. You know, the end of the summer. There you go. And did you see Barbie this past weekend? Or did you see Oppenheimer? Barbenheimer weekend? I went to go see a movie the other night, and the guy who was taking tickets to it has like, I survived Barbenheimer weekend. It's pretty good. I saw Barbie, and I was planning on going to see it opening, like we've been talking about it. Like I'll see the opening before Ben Shapiro and people on the right started losing their collective minds over it, or Ben Shapiro like cut up Barbie dolls and burned them. And it was like 45 minutes, like of all this kind of stuff. And who there's some people that well, I don't want to go into. I really don't care about what these people have to say. But it just goes to show you that they just can't stand it. Like all this kind of men hating stuff. They said this is all anti-man. And I laughed my ass off during that movie. I thought it was so full of joy. Like, look, and I guess I could do a couple things, right? Like one, I saw a bunch of people on the left, right? I know there was a critique that was posted in the Bucks County Beacon. There was critiques that were both by supposed left folks out there. how like it's Mattel and it's like corporate thing and all that. I agree with like look, it's sponsored by Mattel, right? It is about a toy, right? You know, is Mattel going to do something that is going to be about the critique of capitalism and then kind of destroy? No, they're not going to support. So I mean, are there things that that in a perfect movie would have had? Absolutely, right? But what I thought was awesome about it is like Quentin was like legitimately funny in the way that is like even say poked fun at it kind of itself, like as a company, right? The fact that well, I don't want to ruin it if anybody hasn't seen it yet, but because you really should see it. I'm telling you, it's like it's fun. It's like all this like it's a popularizing of a really significant critique, right? And again, if I look at all the radical work that I've say read and people I've talked to over the course of the year, I understand where the critiques are coming from, right? But I also know there is, I'm forgetting who said this once, right? The idea is that I think Mark Engler it might have been him who was talking about this on the show, and I've had other people on the show come on Out to Coop Live in particular talk about this, like. And I read this like in my activist writing media class, right? It's like there's the role of critique, right, and radical critique, and nothing moves without radical critique and organizing around that stuff. Nothing moves without that, right? But there's also the goal of the critique. Right? Say we're talking about critique of capitalism, critique of corporate ownership, critique of white feminism, whatever you're going to talk about, right? The goal of the critiques is not to remain a cloistered, like, monastery where everyone in there knows what each other is saying and agrees with each other, and because they're the true believers. The goal is to popularize it to the point where you win, right? Right, this is what Steve Bannon on the right understood. This is what like Breitbart understood. Andrew Breitbart. Politics is downstream from culture. And ultimately what they were talking about with that, and this is true in a lot of social movement theory too, is like look, the goal, like, yes, politics is the organizing to challenge these particular things and to kind of like win a majority within these particular spaces, right? But the shifts happen because not just because you engaged in ideological critique, the shifts happen because you've engaged in popular organizing. That is so much bigger than those kind of specific critiques. And sometimes I think, my personal opinion, those folks on the left forget that process of movement, right? Forget that the goal is to win as opposed to purity. And like when you're in the opposition, and this is one thing that I just think is, I don't know, maybe it's because whatever, I've been thinking about this for a long time in my life, right? I mean, there was a time when I was much younger, right, where I could sit there and like say, I want everyone to live like this, right? And this is the right way, and this is how we meet everybody's needs and all that other kind of stuff. But so what am I going to do? Impose that on other? That's like messed up, right? This was always my problem with like vanguardism, right? The idea that you have some enlightened elite take things over and do that. No, that doesn't work. Because the world is messy. Human beings are much more messy than that, right? This is why I always, I think Gramsci always had a really good handle on this stuff. Michael Brooks, whose anniversary of his passing was just this past week, he was the co-host of Majority Report. He wrote a bunch of stuff. He was so good about this stuff, right? Michael Brooks was always one that said, look, you want to win, right? You want to move things forward. Right, that doesn't mean the critique stops, right? Just like we talked about with the UPS strike, right? Like, I mean, perfection is not the same thing as winning, right? Perfection is that horizon that we constantly walk towards, right? Democracy, deep democracy, is the one that we constantly walk towards. And there's always going to be new problems that come up. So, anyways, that's a long way of saying what I saw, what was so joyful about Barbie for me, right, was that this was in the public. This smashed box office records. And they were talking overtly about patriarchy as a system. And it was funny. They deploy all the stuff, right? You've got to flip the scripts, right? What would it look like if you turned everything around and like men were in women's place and women were in men's place, or that kind of stuff. But then you get to see all that played off each other. I thought that was great. And there were like men and women and kids in the theater, packed theater, laughing so hard. And unlike some of the critiques I've seen on the left, right, from the left, right, is that those people who were laughing so hard weren't then motivated to go out and buy Barbies. They weren't there just as a marketing pitch to go buy more Barbies. It was the story, right? It was that sense of this ideological moment. So I don't know. So I loved it. I just thought it was. I would go see it. I'll see it in a second. And like, look, the right is going to freak out about any of something. Anytime you want to talk about kind of systems, you want to talk about something that's systemic. Liberals kind of freak out about this stuff too as well, right? When you talk about systemic stuff, instead of just talking about like individual responsibility. Once you start doing that, the right's going to freak out, especially if it kind of jeopardizes the role of the white guy. Right? If it jeopardizes the role of kind of white supremacy, they're going to all freak out. Right? So that should be expected. I thought what the funny thing was the degree, right? The amount of kind of freak out there was just hilarious. So whatever. But here. But I'll end today on a little bit more of a somber note. Sinead O'Connor died at the age of 56 this week. And she was just amazing. I was sharing with my kids some of the music of hers that meant the most to me. I still think one of my favorite songs, and I was listening to a bunch of stuff. Still, my favorite song of hers is "Emperor's New Clothes." I love the fact that the music itself is a little bit more kind of like marchy and upbeat, but the lyrics are so thoughtful and considering and kind of like personal. I mean, I just love that. And her voice is just incredible. But Morrissey, one of the things I just came across this morning, right? And Morrissey wrote this really, they called it in the Guardian, they called it an impassioned screed. Right. And he says that you hadn't the guts to support her. Right. And I'll just read this. I just really like this. He wrote this on his website, but it's come down. It says that he praised her. Well, I'm going to read from the Guardian. Praising her, quote, proud vulnerability, he writes on his website, quote, there is a certain music industry hatred for singers who don't fit in. This I know only too well. And they are never praised until death, when finally they can't answer back. You praise her now only because it's too late. You hadn't the guts to support her when she was alive and she was looking for you. The press will label artists as pests because of what they withhold, and they would call Sinead sad, fat, or shocking or insane. Oh, but not today. No, music CEOs who had put on their most charming smile as they refused her for their roster are queuing up to call her a feminist icon. And 15-minute celebrities and goblins from hell and record labels of artificially aroused diversity are squeezing onto Twitter to Twitter their jibber-jabber when it was you who talked Sinead into giving up because she refused to be labeled and she was degraded. And those few who move the world are always degraded. And he goes on to kind of praise her and puts her in the similar to Judy Garland and Whitney Houston, Amy Winehouse and Marilyn Monroe and Billie Holiday. Quote, she was a challenge and she couldn't be boxed up, and she had the courage to speak when everyone else stayed safely silent. She was harassed for simply being herself. Her eyes finally closed in the search of a soul she could call her own. right? One of her most, one of the moments that kind of really set off the controversy, quote unquote, was when, this is before all the major news broke around the child abuse in the Catholic Church, right? But more and more people were beginning to speak out, right? The major reports hadn't broken yet, but, and she knew it, right? And she knew activists and she knew that kind of stuff. And so she went on Saturday Night Live and sang a version of Bob Marley's War. Right? Everywhere there's war in the East, war in the West. And at the end of that, right, famously, at the end, everywhere there's war. And then she stops, she pulls out a picture of the Pope and says, tears up, that he said, fight the real enemies. Not the war, fight the real enemies, the people who are abusing kids. And for that, she was banned from American television for quite some time. So, rest in power, Sinead O'Connor. It's one of those days, right? You start thinking about her, think about her life and what she meant. So everybody, listen. I hope you have a good weekend. I want a special thanks again to Jenny and Amy, who let me know about some of the technical details, problems that we had at the beginning of the show. But for now, I hope that this finally record. I hope I can get this worked out. I'm still trying to figure out what we can do with my mixer so we can go back to quote unquote some sort of degree of normal. But at least I'm learning about how to get around it better each way. So thank you. Anyways, this is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. You can help support the show by heading over to patreon.com/rcpress. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Yep. And I'll let you know what's happening on Monday. But until then, keep up the fight. See ya!